Today on How It's Made. Chocolate coins. Cap guns. Cocoa beans. And medieval battle axes. Edible money is always a treat. Chocolate coins are handed out to Jewish children during the festival of Hanukkah to teach them the value of money and charity. They are also shared with eager trick-or-treaters looking for a sweet treat on Halloween night. Chocolate coins don't have any purchasing power, but they do buy a lot of appreciative smiles from the kids. They start with giant chocolate bars. Each one is 10 pounds of pure chocolate. The worker transfers the big bars to a kettle. It's a kind of double boiler. Hot water bubbles and steams inside a sleeve shell to heat and melt the chocolate. There are 2.5 tons of liquid chocolate in this kettle. The machine now pumps the chocolate through a long pipe with different cooling zones. The chocolate thickens, but not to the point of solidification, a process called tempering. It causes the chocolate to form a precise crystal structure for just the right texture and taste. The thick liquid chocolate flows onto a conveyor that brings the chocolate under a broad blade. The blade levels it to a specific thickness and spreads it evenly, creating a long sheet of chocolate. The chocolate now begins to coagulate and harden. To spur that process, it travels through a refrigeration tunnel that is approximately 15 yards long. This journey transforms the liquid chocolate into a soft solid. Next, they clean and prepare the die. It's a spring-loaded device that works cookie-cutter style to punch out round blanks. There is one big difference. Each cutter is long and tubular, so as it punches out the chocolate blanks, they accumulate inside. The lattice work of leftovers journeys forward to be remelted into the process. So not a crumb of chocolate goes to waste. At the end of the line, dozens of coin blanks have stacked up in each magazine. And piles of leftover chocolate have accumulated in a bin that will now be transferred back to the melting pot. Now it's time to print some chocolate money. To do this, they wrap the chocolate first and then emboss both the wrap and the chocolate blanks simultaneously. Here's how it works. Sheets of glossy gold foil travel between rollers to establish an even tension. Ahead, a forked arm moves 2 chocolate blanks between the foil sheets. Piston-like knives move in to wrap, cut, and fold the foil around the blanks. The forked arm then delivers the foil-wrapped blanks to a die press. It stamps designs on both sides of the coins, making an impression on the foil through to the chocolate. The chocolate, although solid, is still warm enough to receive the image. Removed from the machine, here's what the die heads look like. These are used to emboss chocolate coins with American penny markings. As for the foil discards, they don't end up on the scrap heap. Instead, they accumulate in a bin to be sent out for recycling. They make 150,000 foil-wrapped coins a day. To change the currency type, they simply switch die heads. Chocolate coins can be made in many sizes, with a range of different illustrations. The coins now spill out onto a conveyor that takes them to a bin. All that's left now is the packaging, which will be the traditional mesh bag. From start to finish, it takes less than an hour to make a chocolate coin. Gold dollars or $5 poker chips. Every day, it's a jackpot of chocolate money at this factory. So there's never any shortage of edible cash. Only decisions to be made. Poker chip or chocolate penny. You could always flip a coin. A cap gun is a toy revolver. When you pull the trigger, it makes a gunshot-like sound and emits a small puff of smoke. The caps are the toy gun's ammo. They contain tiny dots of gunpowder on either a plastic ring or strip of paper. Cowboy-style cap guns were the rage in the 1950s and 60s, during the golden age of westerns. This small American factory uses the molds the major toy companies of the day discarded when they stopped making cap guns long ago. Caps are little dots of gunpowder about 1/16 of an inch in diameter, sandwiched between two strips of paper. Pulling the trigger releases a hammer, which strikes the cap, exploding it. This injection molding machine makes the grips, the faces of the gun handle. It shoots hot liquid plastic into 10 grip molds simultaneously. The plastic cools and solidifies in just seconds. The color and design of grips vary by model. The ones on this rancher-style cap gun feature a steer's head. The rest of the gun is made of cast zinc. Workers load a zinc bar into a smelting pot, heated to about 750 degrees Fahrenheit. The bar melts within a couple of minutes. The molten zinc travels through heated pipes to a plunger, which injects the zinc into a gun parts mold. The zinc takes just 10 seconds to cool and harden. Then it's just a matter of separating the parts. The gun's main body, which contains the right side of the barrel, the loading gate, which covers the cap box, the cylinder, the left side of the barrel, and toy bullets, which load into the cartridge but don't shoot out of the gun. The trigger and hammer are cast in a separate mold. Every piece has flashing, excess metal that forms in the gap between the two halves of the mold. After removing as much as they can with pliers, workers file down the rest. Some flashing is quite thick, so they use a sander to remove it. Workers rinse the smoothed parts in acid to clean the surface, then electroplate them with zinc. They dip the parts in a clear liquid coating to make the matte surface shiny. Now assembly can begin. First, they install the spring which opens the loading gate. They take the left side of the barrel, add the latch that holds the loading gate closed, and the spring which puts tension on that latch. Then the cylinder. And finally, the guiding disc which turns the cylinder when you squeeze the trigger. They screw all that to the main body, which contains the right side of the barrel. Next, they insert an orange plastic safety tip into the end of the barrel. Laws require this to prevent cap guns from being mistaken for real firearms. They hook the loading gate spring to the gate's latch to hold it closed. Then they install the hammer spring and hammer. Two brass grommets secure the cylinder turning arm and the pusher which feeds the caps one by one out of the cap box into striking position. The trigger spring keeps tension on both the cap pusher and the trigger. Next, they install the loading gate. After hooking up additional springs, workers attach the top part of the hammer spring to the holding pin on the hammer. Then the bottom part of the hammer spring to the holding pin on the frame. Finally, the plastic grips. One for each side of the handle. Being cast from vintage molds, these cap guns feature intricate scroll work, a degree of craftsmanship rarely seen in toys nowadays. Something perhaps better appreciated by the parents of the Wild West cowboys than by the pint-sized gunslingers themselves. Cocoa beans come from the fruit of the cocoa tree native to Central and South America. The ancient Mayans would grind them up to make a special beverage for marriage ceremonies and other rituals. Today, cocoa is the primary ingredient in many of our favorite chocolate treats. These cocoa beans from Costa Rica were cultivated without the use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or fungicides. Farming cocoa organically requires meticulous care and maintenance of the crop, along with grafting techniques to help establish disease-tolerant tree varieties. The farmer cuts a budwood, a young branch about to bud, from a healthy, productive tree, and grafts it onto a sucker growing from the base of a tree, which is either diseased or old and unproductive. She cuts a slot at the top of the sucker, then wraps a plastic strip around the budwood to hold in moisture until the graft takes. Next, she cuts a pointed end on the budwood and inserts it into the slot she made in the sucker. Then she binds the union and covers it with a plastic bag. Bagging protects the graft against two potential extremes, dehydration and excessive rain, which causes rot or fungus. If the graft takes, the union seals itself in a month or even sooner. Strategic pruning strengthens the tree and keeps it growing low and in a shape that's easy to maintain and harvest. Before long, flowers begin to bud and bloom. Tiny beetles pollinate the flowers, after which tiny pods, the tree's fruit, begin to emerge. The pods grow and grow, and gradually change color. When the color transformation is complete, they're ripe for harvest. There are many varieties of cocoa trees with pods of different colors. It generally takes about 5 months from first blooms to pod maturity. Come harvest time, they collect only the pods which are undoubtedly ready. If a pod isn't fully ripened, the cocoa beans inside will be acidic and bitter. They carefully cut the pod stem off the branch without damaging the tree in the process. The pod's rind is a little over an inch thick. It's rough and bumpy. They hack it open with a machete to remove the fruit inside. The fruit is made up of a sweet, edible pulp, encasing 30 to 50 large white seeds. These are the cocoa beans. The beans and pulp go to the fermentation area, where workers lay them in boxes or heaps and cover them for 4 to 6 days. As heat under the cover builds up, fermentation kicks in. The natural sugars interact with oxygen. The pulp slowly breaks down, liquefies, and drains away. The color and chemical composition of the beans change, and they become less acidic and develop a chocolatey taste. The next step is to dry the beans. Workers spread them out on big trays and lay them out in the sun for about a week. Here's what a cocoa bean is like wet versus dried. The dried beans now go through a selection process. Workers examine them, removing pod remnants and any beans with mold or other imperfections. Beans which fail inspection are sold locally at a lower price or go to the compost heap. Beans that pass are weighed, bagged for export, and sold to chocolate makers. Depending on the size of the beans, which varies according to the cocoa tree variety, it takes about 300 to 600 cocoa beans to produce 1 kilogram of chocolate. During the medieval era, axes were more than tools. They were terrifying weapons that could inflict very deep wounds. Today, craftsmen still make battle axes for use in the entertainment industry. The medieval battle axe was a brutal weapon. With a single blow, it could break through a knight's armor and fatally wound him. To produce an authentic replica for movies and TV shows, the blacksmith consults reference books. He sketches the axe head design on paper, roughing out the details to the desired scale. He cleans up pieces of old carbon steel, which he'll combine with other metals. In total, there will be 75 metal strips of varying composition. To complete the mix of metals, he cuts an old blade made of nickel steel alloy into equally sized strips. He loads 37 strips into a vise. He tightens the vise and tack welds them together. He sands the welded stack. He rubs oil into the stack to prevent oxidation. Now, exposed to intense heat, the metal layers forge together. He spreads a mix of borax and other minerals called flux onto the surface. This deters oxidation as the forging continues with a pneumatic hammer. The hammer slams the layers together to become a solid laminated block. It's ready to be transformed into the axe's cutting head. Repeated strikes pinch the metal in the center. He sprinkles the flux mixture onto the surface of the metal form, heats it again, and folds it into a C shape. After a reheat, he inserts a layer of carbon steel in the center for the blade. He hammers the C shape flat, leaving the pinch section round for the handle. The 75 strips have been forged into one. Next, the power hammer refines the handle knob. He drives a steel stake called a tapered drift into the center of the knob. This forms an opening for inserting the wood handle. Using the power hammer, he now flattens the blade end of the axe head substantially. He flares it to form a cutting edge and removes the excess with a plasma cutter. He saws it off, and the result is fierce. The axe head has taken shape, but it needs some refining. He hammers the handle area to spread it wider and dips the axe head in water to cool it down. Then he grinds the blade thinner using a belt sander and rinses off the residue. He grinds it again to get rid of any hammer marks or oxidative scale. The different metals react when dipped in acid, creating a swirled pattern on the surface of the head. The first bath was contaminated, so he polishes it off and gives the axe head another rinse in clean acid. After heat treating and tempering, he polishes the face of the axe and hones the edge. Next, he grinds spiral grooves into a piece of oak for the axe's handle. A colleague stains the entire handle to accentuate the carved spirals and enhance the grain of the wood. Once it dries, the blacksmith wedges the axe head onto the handle. A few strikes against the steel block improves the fit. Finally, he hammers upholstery studs onto the handle to simulate the rivets that reinforce the original medieval axe handles. This medieval axe is ready for action. Medieval axe replicas are authentic props for any TV show or movie. Handled carefully, no one will get hurt. If you have any comments about the show, or if you'd like to suggest topics for future shows, drop us a line at sciencechannel.com/howitsmade.